Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Skeptic Live. This is our second second run at this live broadcast. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me. This time I'm streaming to Facebook as well as YouTube. So I'm on both channels and hopefully the sound is coming through. So let me make sure there's no volume here. Okay. So, alhamdulillah, today I want to talk about two main topics. I want to talk about all male panels. This is something that I wrote about last week. And I also wanted to talk, hopefully if we have time, about the Pope's visit to the UAE and the service that they had today, the Catholic service. So I want to address these two topics. Let me just check something first. Okay, so I'm just making sure the comments are coming through. If for some reason the quality is off or the sound is too loud, let me know and I'll try to adjust, inshallah. So before we get into these two important topics, let me just start off like I did last week with from the Qur'an, an ayah from the Qur'an. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه من الكتاب ومهيمنا عليه فاحكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم عما جاءك من الحق لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا ولو شاء الله لجعلكم أمة واحدة ولكن ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم فاستبقوا الخيرات إلى الله مرجعكم جميعا فينبئكم بما كنتم فيه تختلفون صدق الله العظيم. So this is an ayah from Surat Al-Maaida. It's verse 48, I believe. And this, subhanAllah, is an amazing ayah. Let me read you the translation of this. And we have revealed to you the book in truth, confirming that which preceded it of the scripture, and as a criterion over it. So judge between them by what Allah has revealed, and do not follow their inclinations, hawa, away from what has come to you of the truth. To each of you we prescribed a law and a method. Had Allah willed, He would have made you one nation, but He intended to test you in what He has given you, so race to that which is good. To Allah is your return altogether, and He will then inform you concerning that over which you used to differ. So subhanAllah, this is an amazing ayah, and it has some significance for me personally because of my wife. And one day she'll explain to you exactly the effect that this ayah had on her through her courses. So she's a instructor for Al-Asna Institute, the new institute that I founded with my wife to address modern doubts and to inspire confidence and conviction in Islam. So she's a co-instructor and she teaches on various subjects. And one of the topics that she touches on is feminism. And I, of course, talk a lot about feminism. But what she told me is that this ayah really helped her when she was growing up, when she was in high school, because it awakened her to this idea that Allah has laws, and Allah has commands that are specific to each gender and to different people. And Allah is testing us to see who is going to really abide by what He has commanded and who is going to really follow and obey those commands and submit to those commands. Even though there's a difference, there's going to be a difference between nations. So some of the tafsir are referring to, will mention that this ayah is referring to previous anbiya, previous prophets, previous rusul, who brought different laws, different commands from Allah in the Torah, in the Injil, and then later in the Qur'an. So these are different paths, these are different laws, these are different commands that Allah has legislated to different nations. But also it can refer to even within one nation, amongst Muslims, one ummah, we have different, there's different commands that are specific to men, and then there are specific commands that are specific to women. And my wife, just pondering on the meaning of this verse, pondering on how that verse applies to her in her life, realized that we shouldn't, as a woman, I shouldn't be so hung up that not everything in Islam is exactly the same for men versus women. Men have a role, women have a role. This is what Allah has prescribed. This is what the Sharia has as this difference based on gender. And so rather than be hung up, why is not this the same between men and women? There has to be some contentment there with the hukm of Allah, with the qadr of Allah, with what Allah has prescribed to each of us individually. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about gender. It can also be the fact that some of us are richer, some of us are poorer. There's different social status that we're tested with. And so some of us have wealth, and our test is to contribute, to give sadaqah. Some of us don't have wealth, and that's so that we'll be patient with what we have and have qana'ah, have contentment with what Allah has written for us. So these are all tests. And the difference between men and women, this is another test that we have to really be aware of and be content with how Allah has created us and what Allah has legislated for us, depending on who we are, our gender, our economic status, and so forth. So this is why I wanted to share this ayah with you. And it's very relevant to this question of all male panels. All male panels. So let me share with you, share my screen with the article that I wrote. And the title, More All Male Panels, Please. This is what it's about. Let me try to share the screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So this is something that happened a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting with some respected brothers, mashallah, very good, knowledgeable brothers, and they were telling me about this issue where they wanted to have different kinds of panel events, and they were getting a lot of criticism, and in fact they were being boycotted by a group of loud, obnoxious feminists online who thought that having an all-male panel is somehow inherently unjust, it's somehow inherently unfair, it's something that should never happen, there should never be an all-male panel. And so they attacked this group, and they attacked these brothers, and they told me their response, how they responded to these activists and feminists who are attacking them. They said, well, if we only, we tried reaching out to some knowledgeable sisters. If there was a sister who was knowledgeable on this specific issue that we were going to have a panel on, then of course we would have invited her or them. And, this is our bad. Next time, inshallah, we're going to try better. And so it was kind of it was more of an apologetic response. And I don't blame them for that kind of response, in the sense that they were trying their best in that kind of difficult situation. But what I encourage them to do in the future is, instead of answering in that kind of way when you're criticized for an all-male all-male panel, instead say this. Say, why does every panel have to include women? Why is an all-male panel so inherently wrong? What in Islam requires such a thing? That there has to be a female in every single panel, on every single venue, opportunity to address the community. There has to be a woman representative. Why? Where is this coming from? Please explain why a panel that consists of all men is inherently illegitimate just because there's not a female body on it. So this is the response that I think we need to be giving whenever feminists start criticizing and attacking our panels and our conferences and our masajid just because there aren't females present on those at those venues. And the reason that I give in the article is I just mentioned, like, what does this mindset lead to? Where does this mindset that we have to have women on every single panel, what is the implication of that kind of logic? Where does that logic lead? Okay, so put aside the question of where in our tradition do we have this kind of requirement. Where in Islam, where did the Prophet ﷺ, where did Allah in the Qur'an say that there has to be, this quote-unquote female representation? You won't find it. So that, let's just put that question aside. And let's think about, where does this logic lead? What are the implications of having a problem with all male panels? And the implication that I tried to draw in this article is that if you have a problem with all male panels for the simple fact that there's not a female present, then you'll have to have a problem with, for example, the khulafa, right? All of the caliphs of Islam were male. All the rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, they were men, right? There's no female caliph. So if you have a problem with all male panels, you have a problem with the lack of female representation, then you also have to attack the khulafa. And some feminists do attack the khulafa, right? What about the founders of the madhahib? The founders of the madhahib, Sunni schools of thought, all men. What about the transmitters of the different qira'at of the Qur'an? All men. What about the compilers of the 6 Sahih books of Hadith? All men. Okay? All the schools of Kalam were founded by men, and so on and so forth. Right? So if you have a problem with all male panels, you have a problem with the lack of female representation. All of these things within the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it's him, within the time of the Prophet ﷺ, afterwards in the time of the Salaf, afterwards in the time of the Khalaf, with all the scholars of Islam, you're going to have a problem with all of these things. That's the implication. And this is why I've referred to in other places as the slippery slope, the path to apostasy that feminists are on, because they have this idea of the necessity of female representation in a very specific way. Right now, you're going to have a problem with the masjid. You're going to have a problem with the fact that this Islamic conference doesn't have a female representative on the panel. That's the first step. The second step is, okay, well, that's my standard for what constitutes a just panel or a just representation of Islam and so forth. Then, okay, then I'm going to have a problem with the scholarly tradition. I'm going to have a problem with the madhahib in fiqh. I'm going to have a problem with all of the Islamic sciences. I'm going to have a problem with the Salaf. I'm going to have a problem with the Sahaba. Then eventually you're going to have a problem with the Prophet ﷺ himself. Why? Because the last messenger to humanity, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was a man. He didn't have a female, there wasn't a female messenger alongside him. Allah didn't send a male and a female messenger at the same time. He only sent the Prophet ﷺ, a male. So if you adopt the feminist this feminist mentality, even if you don't call it a feminist mentality, because there's some people who will say, "Oh, I'm not a feminist, but I think we have to have female representation." Okay, you're not calling it feminism, but that's where the idea came from. Like I said, what is the source of that idea? What is the source of that value? You're not going to find it in Islam. So that's a feminist idea. If you take that feminist idea and you run with it and you apply and you take it to its logical conclusion, then the logical conclusion is that Allah was unjust. Well, now we left from that kind of thought, but that's the kind of implication, that there's injustice, that the last messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was a man and there was no female representative alongside him. Okay, so that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the logical conclusion, the logical implication. If we take this idea, where does it lead? Because that's where people are going to be led. That's the path that they're going to. And that's why you have some of these Muslim feminists who have gone into the area and the domain of kufr, outright kufr. They'll say things like, they'll start insulting the Anbiya. Okay, and we know one prominent example. She's not the only example, but Amina Wadud, right? She's the one who is insulting Ibrahim alayhi salam and calling him vile, ugly names. So how did she get to that point? Well, that point makes perfect logical sense if you think that female representation has to be XYZ. Okay? So another example, Al-Ashara Al-Mubasharin Bil Jannah. The ones that have been promised or who have been given the glad tidings of Jannah amongst the Sahaba. And the hadith, the 10 that are referenced are all men. They're all men. Now that's not to say that there weren't female companions who were promised Jannah or given the glad tidings of Jannah. There were, of course, Khadija, our mother Khadija radiallahu anha, others. So this is something that, yes, there are female who were promised Jannah or were given the glad tidings of Jannah by the Prophet ﷺ. But why in that particular hadith, or why in that group of 10, why isn't there any female representation? Why isn't there any female representation there? So this is something that we have to try to understand and get out of this kind of feminist mindset. So now let me show you. Now you might think that, oh, Daniel, you're arguing a straw man. There aren't really that many feminists, Muslims who are demanding all male panels. So let me give you some evidence of that. Okay, so here's an article from browngirlmagazine.com. This is why all male panels at Islamic conferences need to come to an end. Pretty strong statement. You have Muslim Girl. You'll always find some terrible stuff on Muslim Girl. In case you missed it, there should be no all-male panels. Okay, take the pledge. That's what they're saying. And then they've compiled a bunch of tweets from people demanding an end to all-male panels. Shahid Amanullah, Muslim male speakers who don't speak out about no all-male panels are not neutral. They are part of the problem. Okay. Please don't assume that if women join a conversation, the quality or level of intellect goes down. I don't know who's assuming that. Seems to be a straw man. There's nothing worse than hearing about women's issues from an all-male panel. This is also, I don't understand, like, what's wrong with a man, a knowledgeable man, a scholar, for example, teaching about certain issues of fiqh that apply to women, hijab or menstruation or these issues. If there is a sister who is qualified and who has studied to teach that aspect of fiqh that is specific to, menstruation, that's something that's very private, then okay, sure, yeah, of course. A woman should teach that. A female scholar should teach that. But if there's not someone in a particular location, or if maybe someone just didn't feel like, maybe that was part, you have a male imam who's teaching that bab of fiqh. Okay, is suddenly some deep violation has occurred if he mentions menstruation, or if he talks about hijab, or if he talks about something that is female focused? No, it's not a deep violation. And also, on the topic of menstruation, men also need to understand the fiqh of menstruation, right? Or the fiqh of postpartum bleeding. Men are also involved in that. Husbands are also involved with that. Fathers are also involved with that. They have to understand the fiqh too. Why do they have to learn that information from a female? Why does anyone have to? There's no have to. It's not wajib. There's no ethical requirement for any of that. Okay, another one. No all-male panels because all-male panels are harming and undermining Muslim communities by reinforcing stereotypes and bringing more prejudices. I don't understand how you can argue that as a Muslim. Again, if that were the case, then there would be prejudices and stereotypes and harm that was happening from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay. Again, mothers, we got talks called Mothers of the Believers with no Muslim moms. And there's no necessity. A male scholar can talk about Mothers of the Believers. They can talk about, all of that without violating anything Islamically. Amina Wadud makes an appearance here. The Qur'an reminds us to know one another. How can we know without all voices? Yeah, again, I it's just confusing to me. It's just really, really confusing to me. Just because a female is not on a particular panel, that means that we are depriving the Muslim community of all female voices? I just don't understand that. There are many ways that sisters can teach Islam, sisters can learn about Islam, sisters can talk to each other about Islam without necessarily being represented on every single panel. It could be possible that they're represented on no panels, right? Because that's actually one of the positions within fiqh, is that, and it's a respected position that seems to get thrown under the bus or ignored. According to some schools of thought, the voice of the woman is also actually awra, is actually something that should not be, out in public and heard by non-mahram men, right? And so, according to that, even, imagine there is someone who is very qualified, a sister who's very qualified to speak and to be on a panel, that would say, no, this is not allowed actually. If there's men in the audience, if there are men in the audience who will hear her voice, then that's also something that we don't accept or agree with. So that's another valid view. But even putting that view aside, remember, the main point here is, why is there a requirement? Why is there a requirement that every male panel have female representation? Okay. So this is all about mixing the genders as well. Okay. This is about ikhtilat. This is about the kind of mixing that's encouraged within the society, the modern society around us. And I'm using the word modern in a negative sense. Why we need to have male spaces. We need to have male spaces. We need to have female spaces. Okay? We need to have female scholars. Let me repeat that. We need to have female scholars who teach females, to teach sisters, to have their own space, to have their own gatherings without mixing and doing all of this. Why have we lost that? Why does everything have to be this kind of mixed affair? There's so much that speaks against that kind of organization and that kind of interaction between the genders. But I don't know why. It's been thrown under the bus. Everyone wants to have, every panel has to have male and female, male and female, male and female. Every class, every course, every conference, there has to be a mix, there has to be a mix, there has to be a mix. Whatever happened to single gender? What's wrong with that? It's still the same knowledge, it's still the same information, it's still the same teaching that can happen, but it's just separating the genders. Linda Sarsour saying there are too many strategic, smart, talented women experts on a whole host of issues. There should be no all-male panels. Yeah, so I don't disagree with that. There are many strategic, smart, talented women. Okay, why do they have to be in front of men on every single panel? That's what you haven't explained. Someone named Laura, implementing no all-male panels means more than just inviting women speakers. It means accommodating them with childcare costs, etc. Yeah, well, that's a good reason why, that's a good reason not to include women. If they have children that they're taking care of, okay, then if there's, again, something that is specifically only one person, that woman with a child, that mother, that's the only person who can address that issue in the world. So she has to be there. It's just nonsensical. Okay, this just keeps going on and going on. Okay. No more silencing of women's voices as if these voices were private parts. I guess that's referring to aura as well. Again, no, I am not talking about silencing women's voices. I'm not talking about silencing women's voices. Not at all. If I believed that, I wouldn't, start an institute with my wife. Okay, my wife is a Harvard graduate, extremely intelligent, mashallah. I don't think that women's voices should be silenced. I don't think that there's no need for female role models, right? So let's focus on exactly what I'm saying so that you don't project the wrong thing onto what I'm saying and think that I'm just being anti-woman. What I'm saying is, what is the necessity, what is the requirement, the moral requirement to have women represented at every single venue, on every single panel? There is no Islamic obligation for that. The only reason that you think that that's an obligation is if you have adopted this feminist mindset. And if you have adopted this feminist mindset, where is that going to lead you? That's going to lead you to thinking that the Islamic scholarly tradition is somehow invalid or somehow unjust because it does not include women as much as men. There were female scholars. There were female scholars in our tradition, of course. They were a small minority. And I'll justify that for you in a second. Okay. Let me pause now and look at some questions. 1 second. There are a lot of comments agreeing with what I'm saying. Since I'm streaming between both Facebook and YouTube, I have to check like 2 sets of comments and questions. Okay. Seems like mostly comments. Abu Respect. These Muslim SJWs are mostly found in America. They would get ran out if they tried in the UK. Okay. Hopefully that's the case. Because there's no place for this kind of feminist nonsense that you have to have all male, you have to have female representation. There's no place for that. Okay, let's go to a couple of things now. So I posted that article. I gave my reasoning. I gave a very simple argument, just the same kind of point that I'm making for you right now. I emphasize that female scholarship is important. Okay, I emphasize that, but I try to make clear the point is that there's no requirement to have female representation on every single panel. Okay, that's the point that I made. Now, there was one person who responded, and I think it's worth looking in depth at what this person said and deconstructing it as a critique of what that article was about. Okay. So it was on Twitter from a sister named Noor. Okay, so Noor, she has a blog, Fig and Olive blog, and I think she considers herself traditional Muslima. So let's see what she said. She took great offense to the article. The fact that this article was written is disturbing enough. The fact that there's no pushback is worse. So we've somehow come full circle. I remember this misogynistic rhetoric from the Salafis of my youth. I didn't think I'd grow up and hear the same from my peers. So I don't know why she's blaming Salafis for being misogynists. I don't know what kind of... I don't think that's fair. I don't think that there's any kind of Sufi-Salafi divide here on the issue of all-male panels. I mean, I've seen many panels and speakers that in Salafi masajid, Sufi masajid, what have you, or more Sufi inclined, without women on them. So I don't think it's a Salafi Sufi issue, but she continues. To say that there's nothing inherently wrong with all male panels, maybe. Okay. Well, that's my whole point. So she concedes the whole point. That's all I'm saying. There's nothing inherently wrong with all male panels. Therefore, when there are all male panels, you shouldn't protest that. You shouldn't slam the organizers. You shouldn't label them as misogynists, as somehow they hate women. So that's my whole point. And maybe, I mean, not maybe, definitely. But she says, to essentially make a case that women have historically been excluded from the field of Islamic scholarship and not contributed much to the field, with no evidence, of course, is an attempt to attack not feminists, quote unquote, but women in general. Okay, so here she's projecting something on me, onto my writing, that women have historically been excluded from the field of Islamic scholarship. I didn't say that women have been excluded from the field of Islamic scholarship, as if there was a deliberate campaign to exclude women and prevent them from studying Islam and the Islamic sciences. I never claimed such a thing because I don't think that such a thing was the case. I do think that, as a matter of fact, just descriptively speaking, there are far less women scholars than men. I don't see that as being a problem. There was an image. So I have a friend who studies hadith. MashaAllah, he's a student of knowledge studying hadith, and he sent me a picture from one of the texts that he's studying, Taqrib al-Tahdhib from Ibn Hajar. This is a text that looks at hadith narrators and gives some, basic biographical information on the narrators of the Sahih of the 6 Sahih books of Hadith. So this is the text. It's not that big of a text, but between his fingers are all of the female Hadith narrators that are in the Sahih Sitta versus males. Okay, so just by sheer number, the number of people, that's a big difference. That's quite a significant difference. So no one has said, so going back to what she's saying, no one is saying that women shouldn't study, women shouldn't become scholars, that women have to be excluded from those things. No one is saying that. I'm not saying that. But as a historical fact of the matter, women have been the minority compared to men. Women have been the minority. So what should we understand of this? Like I said, the implication is that if you take a feminist understanding of representation and female visibility, then this is a big problem. This is a huge problem. The fact that there are so few hadith narrators, the fact that there are so few fuqaha that are female, so few tafasir, exegesis written by women. So this is a problem if you're coming from a feminist mentality. If you're not, it's very easy to understand what's going on. It's very easy to understand what's going on. You have women who are not focusing on those issues historically. Women are in charge of the family in terms of children, making sure the domestic sphere is running smoothly. That's a huge responsibility. That's a huge weight on the shoulders of women as mothers and wives. That's a huge role that they're playing. And that's a role that Islam has prescribed for them. And so we see that historically, which is not to say that some women don't want to be mothers or they don't want to have children. You know, some women naturally don't have that desire, but the vast majority of women do. Naturally, that's how Allah has created men and women. So certain women who do want to go and pursue the highest heights of knowledge and they don't have any kind of interest in being married or in having children, then they should pursue that. Then they can pursue that. And that has happened historically, but it's been a small minority. Whereas when it comes to men, there have been many men who have decided that, look, I'm going to forego, for example, being married and having children. Famous scholars, Imam al-Nawawi, for example. Imam al-Nawawi did not get married. Ibn Taymiyyah, he did not get married. He wasn't married and he didn't have any children. So there are more men who forego that. And they were just so focused and dedicated on their knowledge, on studying and transmitting and teaching and so forth. So this is something that we have to acknowledge as a fact of the difference between men and women. There's a natural difference between men and women. So the fact that historically there have been fewer women is not a problem, is not indicative of a effort to keep women down and to prevent them from studying, prevent them from pursuing knowledge, to prevent them from writing books. Okay? Well, let's continue. So this is what Noor says. And no, the fact that the four madhahib are named after men and the caliphs of Islam were men have nothing to do with women's contribution to the religion. So the four madhahib weren't named after men as if we just decided, oh, here's the madhab, let's just name it after a guy. No, these are the founders of the schools. So Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa. So, and yeah, I agree. No one is saying that women have not contributed to the religion. Okay, so that's a straw man. Noor says, men seek public positions of authority far more often than women. That difference between the genders has nothing to do with the actual quality and the quantity of their work. Yeah. So again, there's a natural difference. Also, authority has been given to men. We already talked about this in length in the previous show about the authority of men and why Allah has given men authority. So that difference between the genders has nothing to do with the actual quality and quantity of the work. I don't know why she seemed to think that I think that women, or I've said that women are not able to do scholarship, or women are not able to contribute to Islamic scholarship. Nowhere did I say this, so I'm not sure why she keeps harping on it. Next tweet, she says, if you read the isnad of the scholars, you'd be hard-pressed to find one that didn't include women, which is not to mention that one of the greatest preservers of hadith was a woman. One of the greatest preservers of hadith, she's referring to our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. As for isnad, like, you'd be hard pressed to find one that didn't include women. There's plenty that don't include women. And I showed you like the sheer quantity of male hadith narrators versus female. So I don't really think that's a salient point. So then to end by saying we should only look for quality scholars, well, what do you think women are asking for? Unqualified female scholars? No, they're asking for quality female scholars to be on those panels beside male scholars. Why? Why are they asking for female scholars? Why is there this need for representation? And she says, Noor says, and it's not feminists only asking for this. It's regular women who want to see themselves represented and who also want to comfortably have access to those scholars they can better relate to. Okay, this doesn't make sense. So why do regular women have to see themselves represented in every single venue, on every single panel? Why do women have to have another woman telling them about Islam in every single case? So again, I agree that there's a big need. There's a big need for women to be teaching the ummah. The first teacher that any Muslim has is his mother, right? And a mother who needs to be educated about Islam to enough of an extent to be able to teach her children about Islam. That's crucial, critical, very important. But that's a mother's role, and it's not something that, okay, the mother has to be sitting in front of all these other men to teach them something. Otherwise, our children won't have any kind of female role models. No, that doesn't make sense. You're also negating the fact that mothers are role models. You're negating the fact that there are female teachers who teach in the masajid, or they teach within community centers, they teach within specific places to other women, right? These all exist, and they have existed. So why is there this need? We have to go back and reorient ourselves to a Islamic standard. What does Islam say about the necessity for this kind of representation, quote unquote? Okay, let me just get through this. Yeah, here's a good point. And this is not a newfound feminist idea, supposedly. The Prophet ﷺ would often allow Aisha to further explain fiqh rulings to women that dealt with intimate matters. So this is a dalil for no all-male panels. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ would allow Aisha to... This proves the point. This exactly proves the point. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't taking Aisha radiallahu anha or any of the other mothers of the believers and putting them in the front of the masjid and saying, okay, now Aisha is going to teach you about Islam. Did the Prophet ﷺ do that? No. She was teaching other women And if she were to teach other men, it was behind a screen. It was behind a screen so that the men couldn't see her. Right? So this is exactly proving the point. That you can have female teachers, you can have female scholarship that doesn't necessitate having a woman being in front of other men. Well, let me change the settings on this mic because I think it's too loud. Okay. Okay. Finally, Noor says, worse than any of this, the article is full of conjecture without substance. Did Daniel actually do the research to conclude, yes, there are some scholars in our history who are women, but they were a very small minority? Yeah, I mean, I did do the research. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that that's the case. Prove otherwise. And maybe if he actually did the research, he'd be amazed, as Sheikh Akram was, at the extent of women's contribution to this religion. And this is shifting the goalpost constantly. Like, this is not a good form of argumentation. Like, at first you're talking about the first point is about whether men are the majority and women are the minority or not. That's the first claim. Then she shifts and talks about the extent of women's contribution to this religion. That's different. That's a different point. Because I can concede, and I would concede that, yeah, there are extensive contributions of women to Islam and to the teaching and propagation of Islam. I concede that point. But the prior point was about majority versus minority. Was the vast majority of scholars, ulama in our tradition, male? She's saying that it's not substantiated, which I find amazing that she would claim that. Okay. And then she says, what Alpha Person and Daniel are spouting may be old school misogyny, but it's not traditional, quote unquote, by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly who Alpha Person she's referring to, but she's saying I'm spouting old school misogyny. Again, not clear that that's the case. And she's appealing to tradition, like what's tradition or not, but all of the things that she's arguing for have nothing to do with the tradition. They're completely unmoored from the tradition. And everything that she does cite from the tradition argues against her point when she, for example, refers to Ayah. So this is the kind of nonsense. People get triggered by something that I write, and then they respond in a way that doesn't really address the arguments or misinterprets them or misrepresents them, and then constantly making this condescending appeal to authority and condescending appeal to tradition. Like, oh, what we're saying is traditional, and what Daniel is saying is just some newfangled misogyny. Okay. Yeah, when I told my wife that I was going to talk about this subject, she said, make sure to emphasize that you're not saying that women have no role to play within Islamic scholarship and within the community itself. Make sure you emphasize that point. So I'm just going to, for the sake of my wife, following her nasiha, say that that's not what I think. I don't think that there's no place for women in Islamic scholarship, past or present. I think that there definitely is. We do have a need for female teachers. But the question is, okay, there are two questions. The first question is, does every single panel, does every single venue, does every single space have to have a female body within it? No. Some of these fiqh councils, every now and then there's controversy about a fiqh council, whether a fiqh council of North America or whatever else. Oh, there's not enough women on on this council, so therefore it's illegitimate. We need to stop this nonsense. We need to stop, like, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with these councils being all men. or majority men. And just because a woman's body is not there does not mean that women's interests are not represented. Why should we conclude that? Unless you have this feminist epistemology that, knowledge that is relevant to women can only be transmitted by women. This is nonsense. This is completely false. It's completely contrary to Islam. Why? Think about it. All of the knowledge of Islam came through the Prophet ﷺ. He's a man. He's a man. If it were not possible for him to teach on women's issues, then Allah would have sent someone else, or would have sent different kinds of representation for women specifically, if that were the case, which is clearly not. So this is why we have to think logically. We have to think about the implications of the values we adopt. So much of the confusion today in the Muslim community is because people don't really think about the implications of what they're promoting. They haven't put two and two together, essentially. And so when myself or others see what they're saying and can understand the next step, the next logical step, and the next logical step is kufr, or the next logical step is apostasy, the next logical step is abandoning Islam, then we're concerned. We're concerned, and we want to stop that initial step, that initial idea. Stop the initial idea so we don't descend into that next step, the logical implication. Okay. Now let me once again see if there's any questions or just commentary. Yeah, Waqas says, imagine if men started wanting to join women's circles just for the sake of it. Yeah, I mean, that's the logical implication as well. Can issues specific to men be taught by women? And so should we make sure that every single women's gathering there's a male representation there? No, that's silly. What else? Mukit Khan says identity politics needs to die. Yes, I agree. Yeah. Let me see Facebook. Usually when I turn on Facebook, the sound comes on. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next topic. Next topic is the Pope. So I wrote an article on this, and we had a guest contributor as well. Let me share it. Okay, so two articles here. The Pope was invited by the Crown Prince in the UAE to come and give Mass, Catholic Mass. And so they had a huge stadium with over 100,000 Catholics who came for this Mass service with the Pope. And so I wrote this utter humiliation, the building of churches and temples in the Gulf, because there's been a lot of news about how different Gulf countries are building Hindu temples and building churches and so forth in the Gulf, in the Arabian Peninsula. And then there's also an article from a guest, John Demeshki, basically. Hamza Yusuf and Bin Beya denounced the Pope 33 years ago. This was very interesting research that was done by this brother. It's a very knowledgeable brother, mashallah, where he talks about how 33 years ago, There was also talk about interfaith and involving the Catholic Church and maybe having, some of this Catholic Church influence within the Middle East. And all of the ulama, all of the scholars at that time were gathering to discuss these kinds of fiqh issues. And Hamza Yusuf and bin Baya were at this Maliki fiqh conference, and they basically denounced the involvement of the Catholic Church. And I'll read to you, here's a picture from that time of Sheikh Hamza and Sheikh bin Baya. And then here's what Sheikh Hamza Yusuf says. I believe there are more worthy causes for dialogue than those between Muslims and Christians. Intra-Muslim dialogues within Muslim societies where some governments don't apply Sharia and the scholars are silent and wish to go to Europe and the US to address people whose enmity to Islam is centuries long. This is bad. They'll never be satisfied with Muslims until they leave Islam and follow other religions. And so he calls, as for the Vatican, its association with criminal mafias is confirmed. Europeans view the Vatican as a criminal gang. When we engage them in dialogue, we are stooping down to the level of these criminals. So, this is amazing because, of course, now they have a different view. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and bin Baya have different views on this, and they've expressed it as cited in the article here. But I just think that what Sheikh Hamza was referring to 33 years ago is just interfaith dialogue itself. He wasn't even talking about the Pope coming to the Gulf, coming to a Muslim country and giving mass and basically preaching and proselytizing. Something far less than that he was denouncing as being a bad idea in so many words. So this is something that is very shocking. It's very shocking within the past 5 years. So recent that now the Gulf countries, these Muslim countries, are now so open to building Hindu temples and having these kinds of religious services within, basically bringing from outside, right? So this is something that is shocking, that this is happening in our times. And subhanAllah, it's very sad. It's very sad. And we're not seeing much, unfortunately, reaction against this. I thought that the Pope being invited, by the UAE, you'd have activists who are really going to oppose that and say, correctly so, they would say that, look at the UAE trying to cover up its crimes, trying to distract attention from the genocide that they're committing in Yemen, and they're contributing to the genocide in Yemen. Look at all the crackdowns that they're doing on Muslims and throwing Muslims in prison, throwing Muslims in, and sentencing them to death. All of these crimes that are being done are being washed away, are being whitewashed by, see, look, we're inviting the Pope and we're so tolerant, we're so peaceful, we want to have the Pope come and give mass. I thought there would be many activists, Muslim activists, who would see right through that and see this as just a publicity stunt to whitewash crimes. But unfortunately, we didn't see that, or not as much as I expected. There was a lot of criticism on the 2018 Peace Forum that Hamza Yusuf and bin Baya were a part of. A lot of people were pointing out the problems with that. I wrote on that as well. But now with the Pope's visit, you don't see the same voices, or as many of the same voices, denouncing that. And I think it's obvious why. People are operating under a liberal secular mindset. So under a liberal secular mindset, you do denounce tyrants, you do denounce genocide, you do denounce corruption. Those are all things where a liberal secular mindset and an Islamic mindset have some consonance and have some overlaps. Fine. But according to a liberal secular mindset, the Pope coming to the Arabian Peninsula and preaching, that's great. That's a positive. That's a huge win from a liberal secular mindset. From an Islamic mindset, no. From an Islamic mindset, no. This is something that is completely forbidden. And if you go to the article that I wrote, you'll see the references for that. If you don't want to take my word for it, go read what scholars have said historically about building new structures, new churches, building new synagogues, building, that's just for Ahl al-Kitab. Even the building of new churches, new synagogues, new religious areas of worship, that's not allowed. And then there's disagreements within the fiqh of what about repairing a church that has been, part of it has been, ruined or destroyed, or part of it has collapsed. What's the permissibility of rebuilding those sections? So there's difference of opinion on that issue. But as far as Christian communities that are a part of the Muslim lands, Dar al-Islam, and they're Ahl al-Dhimma within the Muslim lands, what is the ruling on them being able to build new churches? Build new synagogues? Not allowed. As long as they fall within, and that's Ahlul Kitab. That's not even looking at beyond Ahlul Kitab. Outside of Ahlul Kitab, like a Hindu temple being built in the UAE or in Saudi. So those kinds of fiqhi details, you can look them. I cite authoritative sources in the article, and you can read what Ibn al-Qayyim has to say about it. You can read different ulama, historically what they've said about it. But now, so this is something that is beyond belief, that we've reached a level of normalization where the Pope can come and have a congregation. They basically set up a venue for him so he can come preach kufr, right? So he can come preach kufr and do his dawah, basically. So if you're coming from a secular liberal mindset, Muslims who are in that mindset will see no problem with that. This is great. This is interfaith tolerance, and it's beautiful, wonderful, amazing. SubhanAllah. But if you're coming from the Islamic tradition, if you're coming from Qur'an and Sunnah, then you understand that this is terrible. This is a terrible tragedy and a clear violation of the hudud of Allah, the limits and the boundaries that Allah has set. So that article on Bin Baya and Sheikh Hamza, it has a lot of very interesting historical observations. The fact that Pope Francis coming and visiting this week, that wasn't even the first Pope that came and visited. Pope John Paul II came in 2001 to Syria. He came to Damascus, actually. And he was the first Pope to enter a masjid. He was the first Pope to enter a masjid. So that's interesting historical fact. But it's the same story then as there is now. In the past, the butcher, he's still the butcher, Bashar al-Assad. Okay? Bashar al-Assad was using the Pope, again, to whitewash the kinds of crimes that he and his father had committed at the end of the 20th century and then continuing into the 21st century. Now it's a different set of Arab tyrants who are using the Pope and this kind of veneer of interfaith to whitewash their crimes. So this is Pope John Paul with Mufti Koftaro, who was the previous Syrian Mufti. Yeah. So when these things were happening and people were calling to bring the Pope and have more of this kind of interfaith, the ulama responded and they denounced it. They said that this is not acceptable. It's very clear within the Sharia that you can't have someone coming in and doing this kind of proselytization for kufr within Dar al-Islam, within the Muslim lands. So now they've gone back on this. Now the secular liberal mindset has taken over, unfortunately. So then this was one article. The other article that I wrote, Utter Humiliation, this I addressed a specific argument because people will say, well, Daniel, this is hypocritical. This is hypocritical because you are against the Pope coming to the Gulf and preaching, coming to Muslim lands and preaching. You're against this, but you're living in the West. You're living in America. You're living in these non-Muslim countries. And you are fine with having a mosque. You are fine with propagating your religion. You are fine with calling to Islam. Isn't this a double standard? You are a hypocrite, Daniel. You are a hypocrite for this kind of nonsense that you're, this anti-liberal, anti-secular nonsense that you're preaching. You're a hypocrite. This is like a standard argument that is made, but it's a very silly, empty argument, and it's easily addressed. How do we address this? So we have to start with this idea of reciprocity. Okay, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Right? That's what it means to be reciprocal. There's mutual benefit. There's mutual exchange. Okay? And so when you have this kind of liberal mindset and you're insisting on reciprocity, then there's an equivalence that's created. You have mosques within non-Muslim countries, and then you should also have, or it should also be allowed to have, churches and synagogues and Hindu temples in Muslim lands. That's what's fair. Fair is fair, right? Fair is fair. You have to have this equivalence. But there isn't an equivalence there. Okay? That kind of equivalence between a mosque and a church, the kind of equivalence between Islam and Catholicism or Christianity, that kind of equivalence between Muslim beliefs and Muslim dawah and Christian beliefs and Christian dawah, that equivalence only makes sense within a secular mindset. It only makes sense within a secular mindset. What do I mean by this? You have to be secular to think that Islam and Christianity are equal and equivalent. A Muslim doesn't think that. A Christian doesn't think that. Do you see what I'm saying here? Islam is the truth. Islam is the truth. Christianity is false. All these other religions are false. As a Muslim, that's what it means to be a Muslim. That's what it means to be a Muslim, is this understanding of the truth, that Islam is the truth and these other religions are false. You can't be a Muslim unless you accept this. If you're a perennialist and you think that all religions are true in some sense, okay, then you're not a Muslim. This is kufr. But if you're a Muslim, Islam is the truth and these religions are not true. These are false religions. So there's no equivalence there. It's not a question of I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Okay? The mosque is dedicated to the truth. The masjid is a place for worshiping Allah. Tawheed. Whereas, what is the Pope calling to? He's calling to kufr. He's calling to shirk. He's calling to other than Allah, than Islam. So there's no equivalence there. There's no equivalence there. Only a secular person or someone who is religious but has adopted the liberal secular mindset would think that Islam and Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism and Rastafarianism, all of those are the same. They're just a set of beliefs. It's just a matter of opinion. One person thinks this, another person thinks this. Who knows what's right? Maybe they're all right. These are all just beliefs, and therefore you have to have equivalence and reciprocity. This is the mindset. This is the logic, the liberal secular logic of it. But we don't accept that. Why should we accept that? Why should Muslims accept that? Why should we accept that assumption? Why should we accept that presumption? We wouldn't. And historically, religions didn't accept this kind of assumption. The example that you can look at is the Catholic Church itself. The Catholic Church has been proselytizing and sending, crusaders and sending missionaries throughout the world for centuries. But they wouldn't allow other religions to come and set up shop in the Vatican. They wouldn't do that. Why? It's obvious. According to them, according to their false understanding, Catholicism is true. So why would there be reciprocity? It would make no sense. Okay? So only if we adopt a secular mindset, only if we adopt this secular mindset that, oh, there's no way to know, and there's all religions are essentially the same, and who can tell what is, right and wrong, and every religion has the grain of truth, there are multiple paths to God, etc. Only if you have that kind of mentality, that false mentality, would you find it hypocritical of Muslims like me to be fine with mosques being in the West and not fine with churches in the Gulf being established and being built from scratch. So of course I'm not going to accept that secular mindset. And why should we expect our ulama? Why should we expect our scholars historically for 1400 years to have had that kind of secular mindset? They wouldn't have it. That's why they understood the Sharia, and they understood what Allah and the Prophet ﷺ have sent of Islam. These scholars elaborated the Sharia. They elaborated the Sharia in setting these rules of what is and what is not allowed for Ahl al-Kitab and for other religions and so forth. So we should have no shame. We should have no hesitance or reticence about our tradition, about our ulama, about the Sharia. We should have absolutely no embarrassment or think that this is unjust, that we don't have this concept of religious freedom in Islam. No, that's not a problem, because religious freedom itself is incoherent. The concept itself is incoherent. And I'll give you a point, or I give you an example of that. Is it really the case that America or Europe are Christian nations? Are these really Christian nations? No, they're not. They're clearly not Christian nations. They're liberal secular. They're liberal secular nations. And liberal secular nations have laws that are based on liberal secular thought. And sometimes liberal secular thought borrows from Judeo-Christian thought, Judeo-Christian values, Abrahamic values, and sometimes not. But the point is that the law here is not Christian. And that doesn't mean that it's not based on metaphysics. It's not based on certain kinds of commitments about right and wrong and a theory of good and what is permissible and what's not permissible. No, of course, all laws within every society, secular or religious, ultimately have a basis in morality and right and wrong, a theory of what is right and wrong. What are those values coming from? Where are those values coming from? If it's a truly Christian country, a truly Christian nation, then those laws would be based on Christianity. If it's a Muslim nation, those laws are going to be based on the Sharia. It's going to be based on what Allah has said. That's the source of the morality. And if it's a secular nation, it's going to be based on secular theories of right and wrong, secular theories of good and bad. But those are still theories. Those are still ideas. Why should we accept those ideas? Why should we accept those ideas as being the truth? Why should we be okay with the laws of the land imposed on everyone to be based on what secular liberal thought considers good and bad, evil and righteousness and so forth? Why? So this kind of claimed neutrality of secularism is a mirage. Okay, and then what secular liberals will do, what secular liberal societies do, are establish laws that nonetheless discriminate against Muslims, that discriminate against Christians and Jews and so forth. Many examples of this. Recently we were talking about polygamy. Specifically polygyny, the right of a man to marry multiple women, to marry more than one woman. That's not allowed. That's not allowed according to the law. Why? Why is it not allowed? What is that what is the basis for thinking that that should be something illegal? It's secular theories, liberal secular theories of right and wrong. In many European countries, they're banning slaughter, dhabiha. They're banning the ritual slaughter of meat, halal and kosher. They're prohibiting this by law. Why? What are those laws based on? Those laws are based on certain ideas of what is harmful to an animal, the pain of an animal, all of these ideas that are ultimately normative values that are coming from where? Certain secular liberal ideas. Or circumcision. Circumcision is being banned. It's been already banned in several countries like Iceland, where parents can't decide to circumcise children for religious reasons. So who does this affect? This affects Jews and Muslims. So male circumcision is something that has been done for centuries, millennia. But now they've decided that, oh no, this is something harmful. This is something that is a big problem. We have to ban it because it's causing harm. Okay, well, who decides what's harmful or what's not harmful? Who's deciding these things? Because according to Islam, the truth, it's not harmful. This is something that's very good. Slaughtering animals for meat, halal slaughter, dhabiha, is something very good. It's something very pure. How dare you, or how can you say, as a secular liberal person, that this is not the case? You want to impose your ideas of right and wrong on me, on my community? Fine, but this is not, this imagined ideal that you have for yourself of religious freedom. You're imposing. This is imposition. And that's why I say that religious freedom and this kind of secular neutral ideal is a mirage. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And there's a lot more elaboration on this that I give in the classes that I teach on liberal secularism. Shameless plug, you can sign up to take those courses online, alasna.org. The link is will be in the description of the video, inshallah. But we talk. There are courses, inshallah, that are going to go up very soon on liberal secularism, how to deconstruct these liberal secular arguments, religious freedom, and so forth. Okay. Yeah. It's funny with this issue of the Pope coming to the UAE and this idea of building temples within the Arabian peninsula. You can just anticipate the modernist arguments, right? And when I use the word modernist, the thing is that you have modernists who all of their thinking and all of their thoughts are determined by liberal secularism, by modernist thought, but they still have the external trappings of being traditional. They still will think of themselves even as being very traditionally minded. But all of their intuitions, all of their thoughts, all of their reasoning is framed and influenced to a great extent by these modern ideologies. These modern ideologies like feminism and so forth. In the past hour we talked about one example where the sister thinks that she's very traditional and she eschews the label of being a feminist, but everything that she's saying is straight from a feminist playbook. All the ideas that she's talking about are from a feminist mindset. So she might not call herself a feminist, but that doesn't mean that her thought and her thinking and her understanding are not influenced by feminism. Same thing with liberal secularism. Same thing for all of these modern ideologies. And what we see is this problem of people who are posing as this kind of traditional authority, and then all they're doing is they're taking Islam and they're taking modernism and modernist ideologies and they're just dressing it up. They're just dressing it up to give the impression that it's Islamic, to give the impression that it's traditional, when in fact it's not. So we have to understand this. And the thing is that if you ask certain people, if you ask them about, well, this problem, this objection that I gave you, that, how is it fair that in Islam, according to the Sharia, non-Muslims can't come and build a church and can't give, Catholic service in Muslim lands, but Muslims can go and build mosques and Muslims can go do dawah? How is that fair? Explain to me, how is that fair? And you'll ask someone like that and they'll be stuck and they'll think, oh, yeah, that is a tough question. That's a toughie. And some of them might be moved to say, well, we need new ijtihad. We need new ijtihad. We need to re-examine Islamic sources. We need to go back to the nusus. We need to be open to changing. We need to be open to change. That's what it means to be an intelligent, reasonable person. And Islam is all about being reasonable, being rational. So yes, we have to go back to the nusus. We have to do this new ijtihad. We have to look at maqasid al-sharia, and we have to really try to understand all this nonsense, right? Just nonsense. All you have to do to address the question is what I just told you. You do away with that problem with a clear-cut deconstruction of the liberal secular mindset. It's very simple. Then when you get rid of that liberal secular challenge, then there's no need to be embarrassed about the Sharia. There's no need to be embarrassed about the ulama. There's no need for, times have changed. We have to reapproach the nusus. We have to reapproach our tradition, and there's room for change, blah, blah, blah. All of these apologetics, you just throw that in the trash. Just throw it in the trash, right? That's all it takes. So, and all of these issues is the same thing. So I get frustrated when people don't recognize where their ideas are coming from. They don't recognize that they're being influenced by this foreign ideology. It's foreign in every single way. Like, these ideas are coming from where? 18th, 19th, 20th century America, Europe, by a certain set of thinkers who had these ideas, these musings about right and wrong, and about political philosophy, economic philosophy, social philosophy. They had these thoughts. And then now those thoughts, unfortunately, have become dominant in the world. This is the dominant system. Not because those ideas were particularly intelligent, or those ideas were particularly powerful or rational. It's just that the West conquered the world through force, through their technology. And they imposed these ideologies. They colonized the Muslim mind in many respects. And so now we're dealing with that. We're dealing with the fallout from that. So we have to understand the bigger picture, what is really happening. Okay, now let's look at some comments and questions. Okay, YouTube. So Khalil says, Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. I want to learn a little bit more about the feminist philosophy and the contradictions within it. Any recommendations, reading, video, etc. And also any lecture where I can learn about modern political philosophy. So if you want to learn about these subjects, you have different options. You can go to muslimskeptic.com. I have so many articles on feminism and modern ideology. You can read there. You can follow my Facebook page. You can follow my YouTube channel. There are certain lectures dedicated to feminism specifically and liberal ideology. And then finally, you can subscribe to alesna.org, and there are courses, as I mentioned before, that you can take that go into greater depth than some of these other sources. Okay, great. Someone says here, Alan says, if there was freedom of a religion, then Islam can't flourish. Pretty simple. I don't know what that's referring to. You do realize that Islamic civilization is centuries old and has been dominant in the world for 1400 years. And it's only recently that Muslims have been colonized. So in that entirety of that history, there was no liberal concepts of freedom of religion and so forth. Anyway, it's not like a value. Like I said, it's freedom of religion is something that's incoherent. It's incoherent for many different reasons. The article that I wrote on this, if you go to my website, I've written a lot about it, but if you want to read one essay, it was published a couple of years ago. Let me pull it up. Well, I have multiple articles here. You can just see it. Let me share it. Okay, if you go to muslimskeptic.com, in-depth essays, if reading is what you like, as opposed to watching, you can read these articles, Black Mass, Liberalism, and the Orthodox Paradox. That's a good one. And then Bernie Sanders and the Mirage of Religious Freedom. These two will give you the basic argument. Like I said, it can be elaborated in great length, but you'll have to subscribe to Al-Asna for that kind of material, inshallah. What else do people say? Yeah, I guess Alan, I don't know if he's a troll or what. Anti-Muslim troll. Okay, so this is something that Siyavesh is saying. Siyavesh, is that a Persian name? Is saying, what would you say to those who say that you, Daniel, are pushing people away and that there aren't many feminists who have been convinced by your approach? Yeah, so this is something that I addressed in the previous video, in the previous broadcast. Pushing people away, I don't know, like the first thing that I say when people say that I'm pushing people away is, well, am I pushing people away more than feminism itself is taking people outside of Islam? It's like you have your priorities messed up. Like you don't understand if you think that someone who's criticizing feminism is more of a problem than feminism itself, right? That's the first point to make. The second point is that people say, oh, my approach. What is my approach to feminism? My approach to feminism is to critique it. My approach to feminism is to show how it's doing damage to the Muslim mind, how it's doing damage to society as a whole, how it's dissolving marriages, how it's destroying families, how it's creating a world where the majority of children who are born outside of a married father-mother household, mother-father family, how feminism is turning women against men and creating massive distrust where women are distrusting their husbands, they're distrusting their fathers, they're distrusting their male religious leaders. all of these problems are being caused by feminism. Feminism is the source of all of these issues. So lives, it's not just Muslims that are affected by this. Muslims and non-Muslims are being destroyed by this ideology. That's just talking about the sociological aspects. Then there's the specific impact on Muslim thought. And again, I've elaborated this many times. When it comes to Muslim thought, just look at the whole all-male panels nonsense. If you, like I said, if you adopt that feminist idea of female representation, then the logical conclusion of that, the logical implication of that, is that the vast majority of Islamic scholarship and, in fact, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ is inherently unjust, is inherently irrational, is inherently non-representative. So this is causing apostasy. This is causing people to leave Islam. So two choices. We can either say nothing about this. We can just shut our mouths. There might be some people who are offended if we start criticizing feminism, and be okay with all of these negative consequences, all of this apostasy. Okay, fine, let it happen, because God forbid we offend someone. God forbid someone has to think for 2 seconds beyond the talking points that they've seen on CNN or Huffington Post. God forbid. Or the second option is that we can raise awareness and we can criticize these ideologies and dismantle them so that they're not affecting our families, that they're not destroying our communities, that they're not pulling apart marriages, that they're not causing all of this harm to society as a whole. So for me, it's very clear what option to choose. It's very clear what option to choose. The other thing that people don't understand is that when there's a massive threat, your attitude and your approach and your tone has to be commensurate with the threat. Right? For example, smoking. Someone smokes a cigarette and they're addicted to the cigarette. And I, tell them, stop smoking, this is going to kill you. And their response is, whoa, cool it, man. It's just a cigarette, calm down. Your approach is really not helping here. Your approach is really turning me off right now. Okay, so the threat is you're going to get cancer and you're going to die. This cigarette that you're smoking is an existential threat. It's a mortal threat. So I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to be clear on that and communicate that with you. Will you not like it? Sure, you might not like what I have to say. But I'm trying to save your life. I'm trying to help you. The same thing with feminism. If you don't really appreciate the harm that feminism causes, then any kind of criticism that someone makes, any kind of negative thing that someone like me says about feminism, you're going to experience that as going overboard. You're going to experience that, oh wow, he's really harsh. Right? If there was a massive army, right? Think about this for a second. If I said that, guys, there is this huge army outside on the borders of our town, let's say. There's this huge, massive army that's about to come in and kill all of us. It's about to destroy all of us. We got to do something. Wake up. We have to fight against this. We have to be prepared. This is an existential threat. And people will say, whoa. Calm down there. Stop being over the top. Your tone. Watch your tone, man. This is not appropriate for you to be talking like this. People who would react like that would seem crazy. This is an existential threat that's at our door. Either you don't understand what that means, you don't understand what that threat is, or you're insane, or you're crazy, or you want to die. One of those two. If you do understand the threat, if you do understand what's at stake, then you would see the necessity to criticize. You would see the necessity to critique in very clear black and white terms. in very clear cut, this is what the danger is. This is what's happening. This is the damage that's being done. If you understood the threat. But if you didn't understand the threat, if you don't understand what's going on, you don't understand what's at stake, then all of that is going to seem like extremism, over the top, harsh. Oh, you're driving people away. This kind of attitude is not helpful. It's not productive. Why can't you just be nicer about it? And also, like, my tone, like, people read what I'm writing. Read what I'm writing without projecting your biases, right? Read what I'm writing without projecting this kind of bias that you have, if you have it, against, in favor of feminism, right? And, you know, that's why I would have to say, I'd also say, what else? Yeah, there's a lot that can be said. Oh yeah, another thing, when people criticize me for my tone, I say, okay, do me a favor. Show me exactly what I've written that is not appropriate in terms of tone. Point me to exactly the article or the post that is inappropriate in terms of tone. And show me where I went wrong. Show me where it went wrong. Where I went wrong, where my tone was off. And usually they can't do it. That's because I don't swear. Like, I'm not cursing. I'm not using bad language. I'm not using crude language. Right? The thing about writing, though, is that it's very easy to project your ideas and your thoughts, or your thought of what a person sounds like, onto the writing. And so that also happens a lot, where people read something that is more straightforward or more clear-cut than they're used to. They're used to reading stuff that's overly diplomatic in the bad way, like overly wishy-washy, like, oh, well, feminism, it has some good, it has some bad, you know, who knows, it's all great. Like, they're used to reading that. And so if someone comes along and says, no, feminism is really bad, it's really dangerous, people experience that, whoa, calm down there, calm down, you're going over the top. Even though it's just writing, it's just a simple statement. Feminism is dangerous. Do you feel offended by that? Like, did I attack you? Did I hurt you by making a very simple claim, three word claim? Feminism is dangerous. If that did cause you offense, then you're watching the wrong live broadcast. Okay, hold on. There's some questions here that I need to address. My wife is texting me and saying that there's a question that I should address, but I don't see where that question is. This Facebook doesn't really show me all the comments. That's why it's so annoying. Is it on YouTube? No. Okay, I don't know where this question is. Let me tell my wife to just text me the question. Isn't it great to have family that supports you? Alhamdulillah. So, inshallah, my wife will be teaching some feminism related courses on Al-Asna very soon, inshallah. So you can ask her directly if I'm a misogynist, if I'm a woman hater. Okay. While I wait for that question to come through, let me address one more point, which I think is relevant, because I see within the comments we have someone named White Sharia Now Please, or White Sharia New Please. Okay, I don't know. I can't read all the comments because... So I don't know if this person is supporting white Sharia or not. So what is white Sharia? This is something that I referred to in an article that I published today. Why are so many far-right extremists converting to Islam? There was news last night that went viral of a former member of Geert Wilder's far-right Dutch party that announced that he converted to Islam. His name is Joram van Klaveren. And he quit Wilder's party, and then he converted to Islam. I thought this was amazing. This is the second person from that political party, I believe, that converted recently to Islam. And he was asked in the newspaper interview if he feels guilty about these statements that he made in the past against Islam and against Muslims. And so this new convert said that he had been simply wrong about Islam. He had been simply wrong. So I thought that was a pretty amazing, powerful statement. That Islam is about truth and falsehood. Islam is not a cultural identity. Islam is not a political identity that you just adopt because your parents are from a certain country. No, Islam is about the truth. You accept the truth when you recognize the truth. Not just because you're a part of a certain culture. So then in this article I ask, well, why is it that you have the far right among some of these almost fascistic or neo-Nazi parties? Why do we see some of them converting to Islam? What about Islam attracts them? And so the article makes a very simple point. I just explained that many of the things that are driving people to the far right is their dissatisfaction and their frustration with what they're seeing in the world all around them. Their frustration with the liberal, secular, cultural project. A project that has attacked religion. A project that has attacked family values. A project that has attacked and dismantled marriage and the sanctity of marriage. A project that is pushing homosexuality, the adoption of homosexuality and the loss of gender roles, pushing transgenderism onto society. People are tired of this. The fitrah, people's natural fitrah, reacts negatively to what it's seeing around it. And where can people go? Where can people go to address this situation? They can't go to religion because the only religion that they know is Christianity. The only religion that these white American Europeans know is Christianity. But the modern world has disillusioned them from Christianity. Christianity has been dismantled. Traditional Christianity has been completely dismantled for the most part within Western society. And that's how liberal secularism has come into dominance. And liberal thought has come into dominance. Doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, Democrat or Republican, in terms of US politics. The Republicans, look at who's the head of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. Is he religious? Like, does he strike you as someone who's religious, as someone who is upholding Christian values? Of course not. So people also have this need. We talked about this in the last episode. People have this need for understanding their politics in terms of their morality. Political views and moral views are intimately tied together, and you can't really pull them apart. And so people's political views, they've been told over and over and over again by the secular mentality that religion has nothing to do with politics, religious morality has nothing to do with politics, keep religion outside of politics. So what does that do? People have this sense of identity that they're a part of the nation. We're Americans, we're Germans, we're French, etc. We're British, so on and so forth. Right? They have their identity is on the national level, but the political is completely divorced from religion. So the in the unintended and perhaps the intended outcome of that is that religion has lost its position as being the arbiter of right and wrong, of moral and immoral, in the minds of Westerners. This is the effect of secular liberal ideology. And so basically religion is out of the question, but people have, these Westerners still have the need for meaning. They still have the need for purpose. They still have a need to know that right and wrong is coming from a transcendent source. It's not just something conventional that people are making up, that some philosopher thought up. They have a need for God. They have a need to submit. But where can they find that? So what they end up doing is finding meaning in a ethnic, national identity. We're white. We have a white heritage, and we're so proud. And we have to fight against these immigrants. We have to fight against these Jews. The neo-Nazis. We have to fight against this kind of influence. And so they've created this kind of political identity around whiteness. But it's hollow. It's hollow because whiteness is not a transcendent source of right and wrong. Whiteness is just an ethnicity. So it doesn't really fill that need. It doesn't fill that need. What does fill that need is Islam. What does address those problems is Islam. What does provide that sense of truth, falsehood, right, wrong. What does fight against all of this corruption, all of this degeneracy is what? Is Islam. Modernity is the disease, is the cancer that is infecting so many. Islam is the cure for that. Islam is the cure for that, and that's what people are recognizing. And as Muslims, we have to keep pushing that message. We have to keep pushing that message. Why? Because we care about non-Muslims. We care about whites. We care about black. We care about Asian. We care about all of these ethnicities, all of these identities. We care about people. We want everyone to be saved. We want salvation for everyone. And so we present them with the truth. We present them with the truth in our hopes that they will see the truth and they'll accept the truth, and then their lives will improve in this dunya. Society will improve overall. Civilization will improve and flourish, and then salvation in the akhirah. So this is why I think, and I argue that many in the far right are converting to Islam. They're interested in Islam, and why Muslims should be doing dawah to the far right and the left and everyone. We should be doing dawah to everyone. We're responsible for that. Okay, let me read this question now. This is from Bara. I don't know if it's Bara or Barra. This person comments, back in the past we didn't need to have feminists because people respected the rights of women. Now we no longer have that level of respect. So now we need feminism and females on panels so we can hear the issues and concerns of our sisters. That's the comment. I still don't get it. I don't see why we need to have women on panels to be able to hear their issues and concerns. Maybe if you're not married and you don't have a wife, or you don't have a mother, you don't have any sisters, you're not ever hearing the concerns of women. How can you not hear the concerns of women? In this society of all places, this society is the most gender mixed of any society in history, Muslim or non-Muslim. We're constantly exposed to all the views and the concerns of everyone. So I don't understand why today we can't hear the issues and concerns of our sisters. Even if you don't I think that any community, any healthy community like a masjid community, I think that there needs to be the masjid leadership needs to be very sensitive to the concerns of women. The masjid leadership needs to be concerned with issues that are affecting women. And I think that for the most part, our masajid and our imams are sensitive to the concerns of women. They are. I don't accept this kind of attack on the ulama. I don't accept this kind of attack on our masajid that is coming from this kind of unmasked third space movement where they say, oh, these masajid, they don't understand. They don't understand our concerns. No, I don't accept that. I think our imams are in tune and in touch with what our sisters need and what our sisters' concerns are and what they say, what they complain about, what they want. I think there's no issue there. Why should I accept? Have you done a survey? Is there a survey that will show that these masajid and these imams and these religious leaders are not in tune with female concerns? Okay, show me the data. Don't give me these kinds of impressionistic, anecdotal evidence that are just based on, what the loudest voices on social media are saying. That's not evidence for me. I have confidence in our scholars. I have confidence in our imams. I trust our imams. I trust our masajid. I think that they're not barbaric tyrants, insensitive, who just don't care about women, who don't care about 50% of the community. I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. So prove to me. And then, prove to me how we no longer have respect for women. I mean, speak for yourself. I have respect for women. I value women. I value the contribution of women. I'm sensitive to the concerns of women, namely the women of my family, my wife. If I do something that my wife doesn't like, guess what? I'm going to hear about it. I'm going to hear about it. If there's something that my wife needs, I'm going to know about it. And I'm going to do my best to address those kinds of needs and wants that my wife will have, because that's my domain of authority. And as a responsible wali, as a responsible husband, and all Muslim men need to have this kind of aspiration that, yes, we are addressing the concerns of our women folk, of our wives, of our daughters, of our mothers. Of course, no doubt about it. This claim that most Muslim men don't care, okay, well, prove that. Prove that. I haven't experienced that in my life. Even amongst the people that are in my social circle or in my families, yeah, absolutely. There are individuals who are jerks, individuals who are not living up to their responsibility and are not living up to the Islamic ideal. No doubt about it. But the majority, the general rule is that they are concerned. They do value. They are paying attention. They are providing for their women folk, for the women and their families. That's our duty. That's what it means to be qawwam. الرجال قوامون على النساء, as Allah says in Surat An-Nisa, okay, Ayah 34. This is such an important principle, and I do not accept that we no longer have respect for women and therefore we need feminism. No, not at all. We do not need feminism. We have to reject feminism. It is cancerous, extremely, extremely dangerous. Okay. Final look at questions. Okay, these are mostly comments. Someone says, okay, Brother Ahmed says, at what age did you accept Islam? I was born Muslim, alhamdulillah. I am not a convert. This is, sometimes people are confused about this. Or they assume that I'm a convert because of my complexion. So my parents are from Iran. They moved to the US. I was born in the US. I was born in Houston, Texas. Houston is the best city in the United States, mashallah. So I was born to, both of my parents are from Iran, from Shiraz actually. And so as I've explained my story in different places and different videos, but they were more secular, as Iranians that emigrate from Iran tend to be. They were more secular. I had more of a secular upbringing. I had a Shia upbringing, and then I became Sunni. I became more practicing at the end of high school and college, the beginning of college. So I'm not a white convert. But Daniel is also a Persian name. Daniel, right? Daniel is found in Iran. People name their kids that, also in the subcontinent. And according to the Israeliyat, Daniel was a Nabi as well. And we find that name within the Torah. So this is something that is a name that I was given. It's a good name, alhamdulillah. And Haqiqatjou is also my last name. That's not a pseudonym. That's my family's name is Haqiqatjou, and it means seeker of truth. Haqiqat. I pronounce Haqiqat with the Persian pronunciation of the qaf, not correct tajweed with qalqala. Haqiqat is very difficult. So Haqiqat. Persians make it more of a ghain sound, a ghain. Haqiqat. Jew meaning seeker, talib. So that's my explanation of my name and my background. So jazakallah khair for that question. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Inshallah, we're going to continue this hopefully at the same time. I think this is a good time. It's in the middle of the day for me. I have time for this broadcast. Hopefully it works for you. I'll see you next week, inshallah. Check out muslimskeptic.com. Check out alasna.org. And I will see you then, bi'idhnillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.